The first note was a perfect F-sharp, crisp and clear as it filled the reception hall, hushing conversations and drawing all eyes to the small stage where Harper Lee stood in a simple blue dress, microphone in hand. She wasn't supposed to be the entertainment tonight, she'd come as a guest. A college friend of the bride, but when the hired singer fell ill, Harper had been volunteered by the desperate maid of honor who knew about her background in music. Preston Blake shifted in his seat at the head table, abandoning his half-eaten slice of wedding cake to focus on the woman whose voice now commanded the attention of 200 guests. As CEO of Blake Industries and best man to the groom, he'd fulfilled his duties with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to public speaking and social obligations. Now, with the formal proceedings behind them, he'd been looking forward to slipping away early. That plan evaporated the moment Harper began to sing. The song was a classic love ballad, nothing revolutionary. Yet Harper's interpretation brought fresh emotion to familiar lyrics. Her voice carried both technical precision and raw feeling, a combination Preston hadn't experienced in any of the high-end performances he regularly attended for business networking purposes. "Who is she?" Preston whispered to James, the groom and his longtime friend from business school. James glanced over, surprised to see genuine interest on Preston's normally composed face. "Harper? She's one of Kate's friends from college. Music teacher, I think. Kate mentioned she used to perform professionally but gave it up." Preston nodded, not taking his eyes off Harper as she transitioned seamlessly into another song. He watched how she closed her eyes during particularly emotional phrases, how her hands occasionally gestured to emphasize a lyric. There was nothing calculated about her performance, unlike the polished, image-conscious women who typically circled his social orbit. When Harper finished her third song, the crowd erupted in applause. She gave a small, almost embarrassed bow before stepping down from the stage. Preston found himself standing with everyone else, clapping perhaps a bit longer than necessary. "I should go thank her," James said, rising from his seat. "That was a last-minute save after the singer we hired called in sick." "I'll come with you," Preston heard himself say, surprising both James and himself with the offer. They found Harper by the bar, accepting a glass of water from the bartender. Up close, Preston noticed details hidden from his distant vantage point. Freckles scattered across her nose, eyes a warm hazel color, and a small scar near her right eyebrow. "Harper, that was incredible," James said, giving her a quick hug. "You totally saved the reception." She smiled, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "Happy to help. Honestly, it's been so long since I performed in front of people. I was terrified." "Could have fooled me," Preston said, extending his hand. "Preston Blake." Harper looked up, seeming to really notice him for the first time. "Oh, the best man. Your speech was great, just the right balance of funny and heartfelt." "High praise from someone who clearly knows how to move a room," Preston replied, surprised by the genuine compliment in his voice. Typically, his interactions at events like these were performative, strategic. He was always Preston Blake, CEO, even in social settings. "Harper teaches music to elementary school kids," James explained. "Kate says she's some kind of child whisperer." Harper laughed, a sound that struck Preston as wonderfully unguarded. "I just know how to bribe them with stickers and dance breaks." The conversation might have ended there, a pleasant exchange, before they drifted to different parts of the reception if the bride hadn't appeared, grabbing Harper's hand. "You're not done yet," Kate insisted. "The DJ's about to start, but you have to do one more song first. Everyone's requesting it." Harper looked genuinely flustered. "Kate, I don't think, please? Just one more. You know which one, our song from senior year." Preston watched the interplay between them with interest. Harper's reluctance seemed at odds with the confidence she displayed on stage. "Fine," Harper finally conceded. "But you owe me big time." As Kate pulled her back toward the stage, Harper glanced back at Preston with a look that somehow combined apology, amusement, and resignation. He found himself following, returning to his seat but now fully invested in the performance to come. What followed was a transformation. Harper launched into an upbeat pop song that had been popular about 5 years earlier, but her rendition was nothing like the radio version. She infused it with jazz undertones, played with the melody, and hit notes that showcased a vocal range that had been merely hinted at in her earlier performances. By the time she finished, half the reception was on their feet, and the energy in the room had completely shifted. Preston sat motionless, experiencing something he rarely felt in his high-pressure, strategic life: genuine surprise. The DJ took over afterward, and Harper disappeared into the crowd. Preston spent the next half hour making obligatory rounds, chatting with distant relatives of the groom and various business associates who had been invited. His responses were automatic, his mind elsewhere, scanning the room for a glimpse of blue fabric and auburn hair. He finally spotted her on the outdoor terrace, standing alone at the stone railing, looking out at the garden illuminated by strings of lights. Making a decision that felt uncharacteristically impulsive, Preston grabbed 2 champagne flutes from a passing server and headed outside. "I thought you might want a celebratory drink," he said, offering her one of the glasses as he joined her at the railing. Harper turned, appearing genuinely surprised to see him. "Oh, thank you." She accepted the champagne with a small smile. "Shouldn't you be inside networking with important people or something?" Preston raised an eyebrow. "What makes you think I'm not doing exactly that right now?" She laughed, the sound mixing with the muffled music drifting from inside. "Fair enough, though I'm decidedly unimportant in the grand scheme of things. Just a music teacher who got roped into performing." "A music teacher who clearly has professional training," Preston observed. "James mentioned you used to perform professionally?" Harper took a sip of champagne, her expression shifting slightly. "A lifetime ago. I had a record deal briefly, did some touring as a backup vocalist, then some studio work." She shrugged. "The usual story. The industry wasn't what I expected." Preston nodded, recognizing the deliberate vagueness in her response. "And now you teach kids instead." "And now I teach kids instead," she confirmed, her smile returning. "Much more rewarding, even if it doesn't come with first-class flights and green room riders." A comfortable silence fell between them as they both looked out at the garden. Preston found himself wanting to prolong the conversation, an unusual feeling for someone who typically viewed social interactions as obligations to be efficiently managed. "You know," Harper said suddenly, "I have absolutely no idea what you do. Everyone at my table was talking about you earlier, but I was too busy panicking about singing to pay attention." Preston laughed, surprised by her frankness. "I run Blake Industries. We're primarily in tech development and investment." "Ah," Harper nodded sagely. "One of those people who makes things happen with money and meetings and probably has a calendar scheduled down to the minute." "Something like that," Preston admitted, amused by her assessment. "Though I do occasionally find time for unscheduled conversations at wedding receptions." "How spontaneous of you," Harper teased, finishing her champagne. "Well, Preston Blake of Blake Industries, it was nice meeting you, but I should head back inside. My friend Zoe is my ride, and she looks like she's getting ready to leave." Preston glanced through the glass doors to where a woman in a red dress was checking her phone, clearly preparing to depart. "Of course. I enjoyed our conversation, Harper." She smiled, handing him her empty glass. "Thank you for the champagne, and good luck with all your important money things." Before he could respond, she'd slipped back inside, leaving Preston standing alone on the terrace feeling strangely off balance. He watched as she joined her friend, collected a small purse from their table, and headed toward the exit. Something prompted him to follow, to say something more, but a business associate intercepted him with questions about an upcoming merger. And by the time Preston extracted himself, Harper was gone. It was only the next morning, as Preston reviewed his schedule for the week with his assistant, that he realized he didn't have Harper's last name or any way to contact her. This shouldn't have bothered him. Preston met countless people at social and business functions, yet he found himself unusually preoccupied with the memory of her voice, her unguarded laugh, the way she teased him about his important money things. "Is everything all right, Mr. Blake?" his assistant asked, noticing his distraction. Preston refocused on the schedule in front of him. "Yes, fine. Let's continue." But throughout the day, Harper's songs kept playing in his mind, a soundtrack to meetings and conference calls that usually commanded his full attention. By evening, Preston had made a decision that felt both perfectly logical and utterly irrational. He would find a way to see Harper again. Finding her proved easier than expected. A quick text to James, under the pretense of wanting to thank the singer who saved the reception, yielded Harper's full name. From there, a simple search revealed her workplace, Oak Ridge Elementary, where she taught music. What wasn't simple was determining what to do with this information. Preston Blake didn't pursue women, they pursued him, drawn by his wealth, power, and family name. His romantic history consisted of practical relationships with women from similar backgrounds, partnerships that made sense on paper but inevitably fizzled due to his workaholic tendencies or their interest in his status rather than himself. Harper Lee represented something entirely different. She hadn't seemed impressed or intimidated by him, had no apparent interest in his business or connections, and had walked away from their conversation without angling for more. The novelty was as refreshing as it was confusing. After 3 days of distracted work and uncharacteristic indecision, Preston finally devised a plan. The Blake Foundation, his company's charitable arm, had an established music education initiative. It would be perfectly reasonable for him to visit schools with successful music programs as part of the foundation's research for expanding their grants. Which is how, 10 days after the wedding, Preston found himself walking through the colorful hallways of Oak Ridge Elementary, accompanied by the school's enthusiastic principal and the foundation's education director, whom he'd insisted on bringing to maintain the appearance of a legitimate professional visit. "Our music program has really flourished under Ms. Lee's direction," Principal Sharma was saying as they approached the music room. "The children adore her, and parent participation in our concerts has doubled since she started 3 years ago." Preston nodded, trying to appear professionally interested rather than personally invested. "That's impressive. I'm curious about her approach." They paused outside a classroom door decorated with paper musical notes and student artwork. Through the small window, Preston could see Harper moving energetically around a circle of seated children, each holding a different percussion instrument. She wore casual clothes, jeans, and a green blouse with her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Yet Preston immediately felt the same pull of interest he'd experienced at the wedding. Principal Sharma knocked lightly before opening the door. "Ms. Lee, sorry to interrupt, but we have some special visitors today from the Blake Foundation." The children immediately turned curious eyes toward the newcomers, while Harper looked up with a smile that faltered momentarily when she recognized Preston. Surprise flashed across her face before professional composure took over. "What perfect timing," she recovered smoothly. "We're just exploring rhythm patterns. Would you like to join us?" Before Preston could respond, a small boy with glasses held out a tambourine. "You can use mine, mister. I'm really good at clapping instead." The education director stepped forward to decline, but Preston surprised himself by accepting the instrument. "I'd be honored, thank you." What followed was 30 minutes unlike any Preston had experienced in his adult life. Harper led the class through various rhythm exercises, incorporating their visitors without missing a beat. Preston found himself sitting cross-legged on a carpet square, tapping a tambourine in coordination with 23rd graders, following Harper's animated instructions. She treated him exactly like the other participants, correcting his rhythm when he missed a beat, praising his efforts when he got it right, all without a hint that she remembered their champagne conversation or found his presence unusual. When the bell rang and the children filed out for recess, Harper finally addressed him directly. "Well, Mr. Blake, I didn't expect to see you in my classroom." Her tone was friendly but carried a hint of suspicion. "The Blake Foundation hasn't shown interest in Oak Ridge before." Preston was saved from immediate response by Principal Sharma's enthusiastic explanation of the Foundation's music initiative and potential grants. Harper listened attentively, but her eyes kept returning to Preston with undisguised curiosity. "I'll let you discuss the details," the principal finally said. "Ms. Lee, perhaps you could show Mr. Blake and Ms. Winters our new practice rooms while I handle the recess transition." As soon as the principal left, Harper folded her arms, looking directly at Preston. "So you're scouting elementary schools for grant opportunities now? Seems like a task you could delegate." Ms. Winters, the education director, looked confused by the familiar tone, but Preston appreciated Harper's directness. "I like to be hands-on with Foundation initiatives," he replied, which wasn't entirely untrue. "Your program came highly recommended." "By whom?" Harper challenged, a smile playing at her lips that suggested she wasn't buying his explanation. "James and Kate were very impressed by your performance," Preston said smoothly. "At their wedding, where I was a last-minute replacement and definitely not teaching elementary music." Ms. Winters cleared her throat uncomfortably. "Perhaps I should check in with the principal about those enrollment figures he mentioned." After she hurried out, Harper's professional demeanor relaxed. "Preston Blake, are you using your foundation as an excuse to see me again?" Preston found himself doing something rare, speaking without calculating his response. "Yes, though the foundation's interest in music education is genuine." Harper looked surprised by his honesty, then laughed. "Well, points for creativity, I suppose. Most guys just ask for a number." "Would you have given me yours if I'd asked at the wedding?" She considered this, gathering some sheet music from a nearby piano. "Probably not. I make it a policy not to date guys in suits that cost more than my monthly rent." "A wise policy," Preston acknowledged, inexplicably charmed by her candor. "Though technically, I'm no longer in that suit." Harper looked him over. He'd deliberately dressed down in slacks and a button-down shirt without a tie. "No, now you're in business casual attire that merely costs the same as my weekly groceries." "Much better." Preston found himself genuinely smiling, something that had become increasingly rare in recent years as business pressures mounted. "Have dinner with me." The directness of his request seemed to catch Harper off guard. She studied him for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "Why?" "Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about your performance at the wedding," he said honestly. "Or our conversation afterward. Those are pretty thin reasons to orchestrate an elaborate foundation visit." "I'd like to get to know you better," Preston pressed. "Away from weddings and elementary schools." Harper set down her sheet music, considering him with a frankness he found refreshing. "You know we have absolutely nothing in common, right? I teach music to children for a salary that probably rounds to a rounding error in your annual budget." "Perhaps that's exactly what interests me," Preston admitted. "Or perhaps you're just not used to people who don't immediately say yes to you." Her words held no malice, just astute observation. "That too," Preston acknowledged with a self-deprecating smile. Harper sighed, then reached for a notepad on her desk. She scribbled something and handed it to him. "My number, but I'm not available for dinner at fancy restaurants where the menu has no prices. If you want to get to know me, it'll have to be something normal people do." Preston pocketed the paper, feeling ridiculously pleased. Define normal. Figure it out, CEO. Consider it your first test. Her eyes sparkled with challenge, but before Preston could respond, Ms. Winters returned with Principal Sharma. The rest of the visit proceeded with professional courtesy. Harper showed them the practice rooms and outlined her curriculum approach, all while maintaining a respectful distance from Preston. Only when they were leaving did she catch his eye with a small, private smile that confirmed their conversation hadn't been imagined. That evening, seated in his penthouse office overlooking the city skyline, Preston stared at the number Harper had given him. Dating had always been a straightforward affair for him: reservations at exclusive restaurants, chauffeur-driven cars, weekend trips on private jets. Harper had explicitly rejected that playbook, and Preston found himself genuinely stumped by what might constitute a normal date. He finally called James for insight, downplaying his interest in Harper as casual curiosity. "Dude, are you actually into her?" James asked after Preston's too careful questioning. "Because that would be the most interesting thing you've done in years." "I'm simply trying to thank her properly for saving your reception," Preston deflected. "Right? By asking me what kind of food she likes and whether she enjoys movies." James's tone made it clear he wasn't buying the explanation. "Look, Harper's great, one of Kate's favorite people. But she's not your usual type." "What's that supposed to mean?" "She left a promising music career because she hated the industry politics. She teaches kids because she loves it. Money and status mean nothing to her." "You say that like it's a character flaw," Preston noted. James laughed. "For you, it might be. When was the last time you dated someone who didn't care about your bank account or company?" The question hit harder than Preston expected. "That's unfair." "Is it? Your last 3 relationships were with women featured in business magazines' 30 under 30 lists. You schedule dates around quarterly reports. You've never even been to a regular movie theater since I've known you. It's all private screenings." Preston fell silent, recognizing uncomfortable truth in his friend's assessment. "Look," James continued more gently, "Harper's the real deal. Genuinely kind, talented, completely unimpressed by wealth. If you're actually interested in her, you'll need to be less you." "Less me?" Preston repeated. "You know what I mean. Less CEO, more the guy I met in business school before you took over the family company and became so calculated," Preston supplied. "I was going to say boring, but calculated works too." After hanging up, Preston considered James's words while looking at Harper's number. Being less him was an odd concept after years of cultivating his CEO persona, but something about the challenge appealed to him. Harper had seen through his foundation pretext immediately, had called him out on his privilege without hostility, and still given him her number. The least he could do was try to meet her on her terms. With newfound determination, Preston sent a text. "Normal date proposal. Food truck festival at the Riverfront Park this Saturday afternoon. I promise not to wear anything that costs more than your rent." Harper's response came quickly. "Acceptable terms, though I'll be checking clothing labels. 2 p.m. by the main entrance." Preston smiled at his phone. "I'll be the one in the suspiciously affordable jeans." Saturday arrived with perfect fall weather: crisp air, golden sunshine, and trees beginning to show hints of color. Preston spent an embarrassing amount of time considering his wardrobe before settling on jeans, a plain gray sweater, and casual boots that he'd owned since college but rarely wore. Looking in the mirror, he barely recognized himself without the armor of custom suits and designer accessories. Harper was waiting at the park entrance, wearing a rust-colored cardigan over a simple dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. She did a theatrical double-take when Preston approached. "Wow, you actually own jeans," she observed. "I half expected you to show up in bespoke casual wear or something." "I'm full of surprises," Preston replied, feeling strangely nervous. It had been years since he'd been on a first date that mattered, where impressing the other person wasn't a foregone conclusion. The food truck festival was bustling with weekend crowds, offering everything from gourmet grilled cheese to authentic Thai street food. Harper navigated the options with enthusiasm, asking vendors questions and deliberating over choices with a seriousness Preston found endearing. "You're supposed to try multiple things," she explained as they waited in line for tacos. "That's the whole point of food trucks. Quality sampling." Preston, who typically ate at restaurants where chefs prepared custom menus for him, found himself enjoying the casual approach to dining. They gathered an eclectic meal: tacos, dumplings, loaded fries, and artisanal popsicles, and found a spot on the grass overlooking the river. "So," Harper said between bites of a bulgogi taco, "tell me something about Preston Blake that isn't in your company bio or whatever they say about you in Forbes." Preston considered this while sampling a dumpling. "I collect vintage vinyl records." "Really?" Harper looked genuinely interested. "What kind of music?" "Jazz primarily. Some classic rock. My father started the collection, and I inherited it along with the company." "Do you actually listen to them, or are they just for show?" The question was direct but asked without judgment. "I listen," Preston said. "My apartment has a dedicated room for the collection and proper equipment. It's where I go when I need to think." Harper nodded, seeming to approve. "Analog sound has a warmth digital can't replicate." "What's your favorite album in the collection?" What began as a simple question evolved into a lengthy discussion about music, with Harper's professional knowledge complementing Preston's enthusiastic appreciation. For the first time in years, Preston found himself in a conversation that had nothing to do with business, where his opinions weren't automatically deferred to, where he was challenged and corrected and educated. As they walked through the park afterward, sampling desserts from various trucks, Preston realized he was completely present in the moment, not checking his phone, not thinking about Monday's meetings, not networking or strategizing, just walking beside a woman who treated him like a normal person, laughing at her stories about music school disasters and difficult child prodigies. "Your turn," Harper said as they found a bench overlooking a small pond. "Tell me a disaster story from the high-stakes world of. What exactly does your company do again? Something with technology and money?" Preston laughed. "Blake Industries develops integrated software solutions for financial institutions, along with some consumer applications and venture capital investments." "Right, that's what I said. Money and computers." Harper grinned. "Seriously though, what's the biggest disaster you've faced?" Instead of sharing an anecdote about market downturns or failed products, Preston found himself telling her about his father's unexpected death 5 years earlier, how he'd been thrust into leadership at 28, unprepared for the emotional toll of losing a parent while simultaneously taking over a company with thousands of employees depending on him. "That's why I work so much," he admitted, surprised by his own candor. "I'm always afraid of failing the legacy, of not measuring up." Harper listened without interrupting, her expression thoughtful. "That's a lot of pressure to put on yourself," she said finally. "Does running the company make you happy?" The question was so simple yet so rarely asked that Preston found himself momentarily speechless. "I don't really think about it in those terms. It's my responsibility." "That's not what I asked," Harper pointed out gently. "Parts of it do," Preston said after consideration. "I enjoy solving problems, creating things that help people. I don't enjoy the politics or the constant public scrutiny." Harper nodded. "I get that. That's why I left performing. I loved the music but hated everything surrounding it." As evening approached, they walked back toward the park entrance, the comfortable conversation continuing without effort or awkwardness. When they reached the street where they'd need to part ways, Preston found himself reluctant to end the date. "I had a surprisingly good time," Harper admitted. "For a CEO, you're not terrible company." High praise, Preston smiled. Would not terrible company consider seeing me again? Harper studied him for a moment. That depends. Is this a novelty for you? Slumming with a teacher. Experiencing how the other half lives before returning to your penthouse and private jets. The question held no bitterness, just honest inquiry, and Preston appreciated her directness. No, this is. I've spent the past 5 years becoming someone I'm not sure I recognize anymore. Today felt like breathing fresh air after being in a stuffy room too long. Harper's expression softened. Poetic for a numbers guy. I contain multitudes, Preston said with mock seriousness. We'll see about that, Harper replied, then surprised him by rising on tiptoes to kiss his cheek. Yes, I'll see you again. But next time, I get to pick the activity. Their second date was a weeknight concert at a small jazz club where one of Harper's former professors was performing. Preston arrived directly from work, having barely had time to remove his tie before meeting her at the venue, a basement establishment with mismatched furniture and walls covered in signed photographs of musicians. Sorry about the suit, he apologized as they found a small table near the back. Board meeting ran late. Harper waved off his concern. I don't actually have a problem with suits, just the mindset that sometimes comes with them. The club was intimate enough that they could speak quietly between sets, and Preston found himself sharing more about his work than he'd intended, not the polished narratives he gave to business publications, but the genuine challenges and occasional absurdities of corporate leadership. Harper, in turn, told him about the politics of school music programs, the constant battle for funding, and the occasional difficult parent who insisted their marginally talented child was the next Mozart. Why elementary music? Preston asked during a break between sets. With your talent, you could teach at a conservatory, work with advanced students. Harper considered this as she sipped her wine. I love the moment when children first discover music not as something to achieve or compete with, but as pure joy and expression. Once they get older, so many start seeing it as a skill to master rather than an experience to have. Like everything else in adulthood, Preston observed. Exactly. When was the last time you did something just because it made you happy, with no purpose beyond enjoyment? Preston couldn't immediately answer, which was answer enough. Their third date was a cooking class Harper had signed them up for, where Preston revealed himself to be hopelessly inept in the kitchen, having grown up with household staff and then transitioning to takeout and restaurant meals as an adult. Harper found his culinary failures hilarious, especially his disastrous attempt at making pasta from scratch. How can someone who runs a multinational company not know how to use a rolling pin? She teased as she helped him rescue his dough. Different skill sets, Preston defended himself, flour dusting his cheeks. I bet you can't create a compelling quarterly earnings presentation. True, but my skill feeds me, Harper countered, demonstrating the proper technique with easy confidence. By their fifth date, a gallery opening for one of Harper's friends, Preston realized he was rearranging his schedule to accommodate their time together, something he'd never done for previous relationships. His assistant had noticed the change, commenting on his unusual insistence on leaving the office by 7 on certain evenings. More surprising was how much he enjoyed being with someone who had no connection to his business world. Harper asked questions no one else would dare, challenged his perspectives, and refused to be impressed by the trappings of wealth that had become invisible to him. You really paid $8 million for that apartment? She asked incredulously when she first visited his penthouse, 3 months into their relationship. It doesn't even have character. It has a spectacular view, Preston defended, gesturing toward the floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city skyline. Views don't make homes, Harper replied, running her hand along the sleek, minimalist furniture. This place feels like a hotel. Where are your personal things? The question made Preston look around with fresh eyes. Besides his record collection room, The apartment did lack personality. Everything had been selected by an interior designer to project success and sophistication, with little input from Preston himself. "I'm not here much," he admitted. "It's mostly for sleeping and working." Harper shook her head. "That's sad. A home should reflect who you are, not just serve a function." The observation stayed with Preston, prompting him to begin making small changes to his space, adding books. He actually enjoyed reading rather than impressive classics, displaying artwork that spoke to him personally rather than investment pieces, creating a space that felt lived in rather than merely occupied. 6 months into their relationship, Preston realized 2 significant things. He was falling in love with Harper, and she had fundamentally changed his perspective on what mattered in life. The realization came during a weekend getaway to a rustic cabin Harper had rented for his birthday. No internet, spotty cell service, and actual wildlife, she'd promised with mischievous delight. The perfect digital detox for a workaholic CEO. Preston had agreed with feigned reluctance, secretly touched by her effort to plan a weekend around his interests, hiking trails nearby, a record player in the cabin with a selection of jazz albums she'd borrowed from his collection, and no obligations beyond enjoying each other's company. On their last evening, sitting on the cabin's porch watching the sunset, Preston found himself thinking about how differently he approached time now. Before Harper, his days were measured in productivity, achievements, milestones reached. Now, he found himself appreciating moments for their inherent value, the way Harper's face lit up when she described a breakthrough with a struggling student, the comfortable silence of reading together on Sunday mornings, the simple pleasure of cooking dinner together. He'd improved considerably under her tutelage. "What's going on in that busy brain of yours?" Harper asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. Preston turned to look at her, illuminated by the golden light of sunset, and felt a certainty that had nothing to do with business strategy or calculated decision-making. "I'm thinking that I love you," he said simply, "and that you've completely changed my life." Harper's smile was soft as she reached for his hand. "That's convenient, because I love you too, though I'm not sure about the life-changing part." "You don't see it," Preston insisted. "Before you, I was all about the next acquisition, the next quarter, the next achievement. I wasn't living so much as accumulating. And now I understand what I was missing. Connection, purpose beyond profit. Actually enjoying my life instead of just succeeding at it." Harper leaned against his shoulder, her fingers intertwined with his. "Does this mean you're going to start wearing jeans to board meetings and playing tambourine with my 3rd graders? Preston laughed. "I draw the line at tambourine in professional settings. But it does mean I'm reevaluating what success really means to me." 1 year after they met, Preston proposed to Harper in the elementary school music room where he'd first visited her, enlisting her students to help by playing a special arrangement of the song she'd performed at the wedding where they first met. Harper said yes through tears of surprised laughter, while 20 excited 3rd graders cheered, and one small boy with glasses solemnly offered Preston his tambourine, for good luck. Their wedding was held in a botanical garden, with James serving as Preston's best man, returning the favor from his own wedding. The ceremony reflected both their worlds, elegant without being ostentatious, with personal touches that showcased their journey together. Preston's business associates mingled with Harper's teacher colleagues and musician friends, creating an eclectic gathering that somehow worked perfectly. At the reception, Preston surprised everyone by joining Harper on stage for a duet hymn on piano, her singing performing a song they'd practiced for months in secret. Preston's playing was competent rather than brilliant, but the joy on his face as he accompanied Harper spoke volumes about how far he'd come from the calculated, reserved CEO who had once measured every interaction for strategic value. Later that evening, as they shared their first dance, Harper whispered, "Did you ever imagine, when you heard me sing at James and Kate's wedding, that we'd end up here?" Preston pulled her closer. "I knew something important was happening. I just didn't realize it would be the best business decision I ever made." Harper laughed against his shoulder. Only you would describe falling in love as a business decision. Investment in future happiness, Preston corrected with a smile, with exceptional returns already being realized. As they moved across the dance floor, surrounded by friends and family, Preston reflected on how a single evening one spontaneous performance by a woman who hadn't even been supposed to sing had altered the course of his life completely. The CEO who had once valued efficiency above emotion, strategy above spontaneity, had found something far more valuable in the music teacher who had challenged his every assumption about what constituted a successful life. And as Harper smiled up at him, her eyes reflecting the same love he felt, Preston Blake knew with absolute certainty that some investments transcended balance sheets, and quarterly reports they transformed not just portfolios, but hearts.